United Arab Emirates. Oil, sand, skyscrapers, luxury, gold, supercars. A place known for excess spectacle and building the impossible in the middle of the desert. Not exactly the first place that comes to mind when you think of airsoft. And yet, somehow, this is where one of the most ambitious airsoft events ever was about to happen. A worldwide tactical and speeds of competition with a prize pool of $280,000. Not store credit, not trophies, cash. At the end of the event, teams were literally walking away with envelopes full of money. And that was only part of what made this whole thing so surreal. Because once we got involved, it stopped feeling like just another event, and it started feeling like something much bigger. The story started about 6 months earlier when we were first approached by the organizers. They told us they were building a major international airsoft competition in the UAE, a place you really do not associate with organized airsoft on this scale. The vision sounded huge. The promises sounded huge. The prize money was huge. Naturally, we were skeptical. Who puts this much money into an airsoft event? Why did some of the early content look almost AI generated? Was this even real? At first, it all sounded too good to be true. So we passed. But over time, more information came in, more details, more proof, more reasons to believe this thing actually might happen. Eventually, we changed our minds and we decided to support it, sponsor it, and be there in person. And then the geopolitical tension started in the region and the airspace was closed. At this point, we thought the whole thing was dead. This is not a casual local scrimmage where a few people can drop out and the day still goes on. This was a structured 5v5 international tournament. Players had jobs, families, obligations, flights, teammates, depending on them. If one of the players backed out, the whole team could be out. So the question became very simple. Who would willingly fly into a region that suddenly looked like a potential conflict zone just to play airsoft? It made no sense. We waited as long as we could. Flights were changing constantly. Information kept shifting. Everything felt uncertain right up to the last moment. And then, on the day of the departure, after what felt like the 5th flight change in a week, we were told the event was still on and the situation was stable enough to travel. Was it risky? Yes. Probably more than we were comfortable admitting at the first time. But this was also something airsoft had never really seen before. A global event with serious money, massive production, and the potential to put the sport in front of a completely different audience. It was being broadcasted to 150 countries around the world. If it worked, it could help push airsoft further into the mainstream and change how people see it. And that mattered to us. So we got on the plane. The flight from Vienna to Dubai was smooth. We landed, met the driver, got to the hotel, check-in. No issues, no chaos, no rockets on the ride in. Everything felt strangely normal. Quiet even. Until the next morning. At 6:30 a.m., after maybe 4 hours of sleep, our phones started screaming. Missile alert. We got up, half awake, trying to understand what was happening. Then we heard a couple of loud bangs outside. Interceptors. And then silence. That was our welcome. Over the next week, we got a few more alerts. More screaming phones, more moments where you stopped whatever you were doing and checked what was going on. But strangely enough, after the first shock, we started feeling relatively safe. Mostly because we never actually saw anything ourselves. And also because every local and every resident around us reacted the same way. The phones would go off and nobody seemed to panic. People just carried on with their day just like this was annoying but manageable. That calm was weirdly reassuring. Even getting around had its own strange reminder of what was going on. Car navigation could be spotty because GPS was being jammed due to the drone attacks. So even something as basic as getting from one place to another sometimes felt a little off. Then we arrived at the venue and suddenly everything became real. This was not some rough field setup with a few barriers and banners. This place looked like it had been pulled straight out of a movie. Because in a way, it had. The venue was built on a film set and it showed. War-torn buildings, debris everywhere, countless windows, alleys, angles, lanes and positions to fight from. Every corner looked cinematic. Every route felt playable. It looked like something straight out of an airsofter's imagination. The kind of place you dream about playing on, but never really expected to see in real life. We were there for 2 days before the event, which gave us the time to walk the site, meet the staff, and see the final preparations up close. And that is usually the moment when you can tell whether an event is real or just pretending to be real. This one was real. People were everywhere working. The broadcast crew was getting ready, staff were setting up, players were training, BBs were being swept up. Everyone was focused. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked like they had too much to do and not enough time to do it. Which is exactly how a real event feels right before it starts. We filmed, we talked to people, we got a feel for the place, and then we went back to the hotel. Finally, it felt like the hardest part was over. Then the next disaster hit. Rain in the desert. Not just a little rain either. Within hours, roads were flooding, traffic was collapsing, highways were turning into lakes, and once again the schedule was under threat. So now the event had survived the war only to get hit by a flood. At that point, it almost felt absurd, but somehow it kept going. Luckily, the speed-off part of the competition was indoors, so the organizers reshuffled the schedule around the weather and kept the event moving. Barely, but they moved it. And once the matches started, it was clear that this was not just a flashy event. The level was real. Fast rounds, tight coordination, no room for mistakes. One bad push and it could be over for the team. And that was one of the most impressive parts of the whole week. No matter what happened, they kept finding a way. I can only imagine what was going on behind the scenes. The stress, the pressure, the constant last-minute changes. But from the outside, the team kept pushing, they kept adapting, they kept solving problems. At our hotel, one of the teams was getting picked up at 6 a.m. and returning only after midnight, day after day. Minimal sleep, constant pressure, endless waiting, traveling, preparing, competing. Nobody was there for an easy week. And yet the event kept rolling. Seeing Airsoft presented with this level of production, structure and visibility felt completely different from what most players are used to. Professional cameras, live production, interviews, branded stages, full ceremony. It felt closer to a real sports event than a typical Airsoft weekend. At some point, we stopped asking whether this was really happening and just stood there realizing that it actually was. Then, finally, on the last day, the weather cleared, blue sky, sunshine, light breeze in the middle of the desert. Albeit a little bit too hot for my taste. For the first time all week, everything felt exactly how you would have imagined it from the beginning. And that is what made the ending hit so hard. After all the uncertainty, after all the delays, after the alerts, the flooding, the schedule changes and everything else, the event actually made it to the finish line. The finals happened, the winners were crowned, and His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Saif bin Zayed Al Nahyan arrived for the closing ceremony and handed over the prizes. That moment made the whole thing feel real in a different way. Not just because of the money, not just because of the production, but because despite everything stacking up against it, this event actually happened. Teams from around the world showed up, they played, they pushed through, they competed on a stage Airsoft almost never gets. And at the end of it, many of them went home with envelopes full of cash, while millions of people on the TV and social media had the chance to see Airsoft presented as something bigger, more serious, and more visible than the usual stereotype of people just playing toy soldiers in the woods. That's the biggest point. Not just the prize money or the location, but the fact that Airsoft was being presented as something serious enough for the world to actually notice. Later that night, back at the hotel, everyone finally had a moment to breathe. We met up, celebrated, had a couple of drinks, and tried to process what had just happened. Then, a few hours later, it was already time to leave. The driver picked us up, we got to the airport, and for once, everything was simple. No flooding, no road closures, no alerts, no drama. Just half-empty airport and a flight home. Looking back, that entire week felt unreal. Not because the event was fake, but because it was real. Real enough to survive the geopolitical tension, real enough to survive floods, real enough to bring teams from all over the world into one place and actually deliver on a promise that in the beginning sounded completely insane. Huge respect to everyone who made it happen. A special thanks to Sheikh Zayed bin Saif bin Zayed Al Nahyan and the royal family and the UAE Federation for supporting and organizing the event. And respect to the players, the referees, the production and broadcast crew, the support staff, everyone who showed up, worked through the uncertainty and refused to let the whole thing fall apart. For 1 week, Airsoft felt bigger than usual, bigger than local scenes, bigger than internet bubbles, bigger than what most people think this hobby can be. The UAE may not be the place you expect Airsoft history to happen, but for 1 week that's exactly what it felt like. And from what I hear, they are already working on World Airsoft Games 2027.